doing a video recording, so this is going to go a little bumpy. But so these slides are about our psycholinguistics module, and today or in this module, I will discuss how it is my slide isn't moving forward. How do we store language in our brain? How do we perceive language? How do we process language? And how is language affected when the brain is affected? How do we store language? We will use an example from our lexical capacity, the vocabulary we have for words, the lexicon. So science shows that the categories we have for words are fuzzy categories, which is to say that we have in a given category, like bird, we have exemplars, which are obvious members of that category, and then we have peripheral examples. So robin is an exemplar for the category bird, but emu is a peripheral example. Typically, in psycholinguistics, the way we learn about the human capacity to store words, our knowledge of words, our knowledge of meaning and concepts is investigated through lexical decision tasks. These tests reveal how word meaning is organized in our brain. So some lexical decision tasks are the rapid naming task. So a word appears on the screen and you decide whether it's an actual word or a nonsense word. Remember the examples we had with children, the WUG test. So the word bug will appear and you will decide, oh, that's a real word. And then the word wug will appear and then you'll say, that's not a real word. So you'll have a choice to press one or two buttons on the keyboard. Priming is another kind of lexical decision task, and that is the way that goes is that a word will appear on the screen, which is the prime word, like doctor, and then another word will appear, which is the target word, like nurse, and you decide whether the two words are connected or not. And so if the word nurse appears after the prime apple, it takes longer for people to make a decision about the second word. Here's a source I have for you, which, so now I'm going to shift screens and see if I can do this successfully. And play this.
In the last unit, we suggested that intentions for word meanings might be organized in our minds as fuzzy categories. Our minds construct categories of things based on our experience in the world. Each time we encounter an extension of a word, we count it as an exemplar in that fuzzy category. There's some evidence from psychology and psycholinguistics that our mind really does represent a difference between prototypical category members and peripheral members. For lots of categories, we have some instinct about what kinds of exemplars are prototypical and what kinds are peripheral. When we give somebody the name of a category and ask them to name an exemplar, people from a given language community are remarkably alike in the first things they name as exemplars. If your mental grammar for English is like mine, then perhaps your prototypical bird is a robin. Maybe your prototypical fruit is an apple. Your prototypical tool is a hammer. In a behavioral study of word recognition, participants saw a word appear on a screen and they had to say the word out loud. This is called a rapid naming task. Some of the words referred to prototypical exemplars of their particular category, and some of them referred to peripheral exemplars. The prototypical and peripheral exemplars were all mixed up in the experiment, but when the researchers measured how fast people had been able to name the word that they saw, they found that people were faster to name the prototypes than the peripheral exemplars. The same researchers used these words in a lexical decision task. In this kind of task, a word appears briefly on a screen, and the person's job is just to decide whether it's a word or not and say yes or no. So if the word pants appears on the screen, you would say yes, because it's a real word in English. But if fonk appears, you say no, because that's not a word of English. What the researchers found in the lexical decision experiment was again that people are fast to make a decision about a word if it refers to a prototypical category member, and slower to make the decision if the word refers to a peripheral member. These findings indicate that the process of recognizing a word is easier and faster if that word refers to a prototype. We can interpret these findings to mean that our intentions for categories are made up of exemplars, and that prototypical exemplars have a privileged position in our intentions. So that's a couple of examples of psycholinguistic tasks we can use to observe how words are processed in our minds: a simple naming task and a lexical decision task. There's an additional task that we can combine with each of these to allow us to investigate relationships between different words. That task is called priming. Primed lexical decision task works like this. First, a word appears on the screen for a very short length of time. That word is called the prime. The prime disappears, and then a second word appears on the screen. This word is the target, and the participant makes a lexical decision about the target. The prime word can have an influence on how quickly people make their lexical decision about the target word. For example, in one condition, the prime might be doctor and the target nurse. In another condition, the prime could be apple and the target nurse. As you might expect, people are faster to make their lexical decision to nurse when it's primed by doctor than when it's primed by apple. When we observe this faster lexical decision, we interpret that to mean that these two words are connected to each other in our minds. Over the years, psychologists and psycholinguists have conducted thousands of experiments on priming, and the results of these experiments show us how words are related to each other in our minds. Scientific literature has shown priming between words that are members of the same category, for words that are synonyms, antonyms, and even for words that describe things that share attributes. For example, an orange and a baseball aren't members of the same category, but they're both spheres, so they can prime each other. Looking at all these and many other priming effects, we can conclude that those semantic relationships play an important role in how the meanings of words are organized in our minds.
So we will continue our module with technical difficulties. So, the module that you just watched was from the source, The Essentials of Linguistics, Psycholinguistics of Word Meanings. Now we will continue with, so this was about how we store language in our mind, and in particular, how do we store words in our mind. And from years of psycholinguistic studies, we learned that word meanings are connected in our minds. They look a little bit like a web or a network of connections where some things are closer to each other and are connected very strongly, like doctor and nurse, and other things are more at the periphery and are connected, but they are the connection isn't as strong. Like the bird emu is connected to the category bird, but it's a fuzzy exemplar rather than a typical exemplar. So we are now going to move from speech perception, from storing language to perceiving language to speech perception. And here we are going to debunk a myth, which is about the fact that perception is limited to hearing. From perception, then we will move on to processing and language disorders and aphasia. And the myth there is that there's only one area. The myth we will bust in language disorders is that there's only